Hello, I'm Jorge Gestoso. Welcome to a new program from Washington. On today's show, a conversation with the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Ralph Gonsalves. Mr. Prime Minister, a warm welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Gonsalves, you are coming to the Organization of the American States to give a lecture, and the name of the lecture is Reparations for Slavery and the Genocide of Native Peoples. Why now?
Well, in every historical canvas, moments do arise. Ideas come to fruition at a particular stage in the evolution of human history, and this is one moment. For decades, groups of persons in our region, academics, cultural personalities, members of the Rastafarian movement, would address the issue of reparations, a repairing for the consequences and the legacies of slavery and, of course, native genocide. And governments have evolved. Personalities like myself have come to office who, while out of office, clamored for these matters to be put on the agenda. And then, of course, there's a worldwide movement. The United Nations has endorsed this current decade as a decade for the people of African descent. And our governments have become far more independent-minded and more self-assured to raise these kinds of questions. Jean-Bertrand Aristide had raised it in 2002.
The ex-president, former president of Haiti.
Former president of Haiti. And of course, as we know, many thoughtful observers think that his involuntary removal from office was connected to his persistent demand for reparations.
Let's say it's a coup d'etat. I was there.
Yes, well, I try not to create a controversy on either side by simply saying his removal was not voluntary.
In 2013, your country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, have already called the European countries to pay for reparations. How did it go?
Well, even before 2013, but there was a formal demand after we had established the CARICOM Reparations Commission. I led the fight to have all the governments agree, all the CARICOM governments.
15 countries.
15 countries of the Caribbean community to agree to set up this commission to drive the question of reparations. Basically, we are not seeking a confrontation with Britain in the case of the former British colonies, or with France in the case of Haiti, or with Holland in the case of Suriname, all members of the Caribbean community. We want a mature conversation. I mean, I'm the Prime Minister of an independent nation state. I don't have to go and hold a placard in front of number 10 Downing Street, the office and residence of the British Prime Minister. I don't have to have any tantrums. We have a strong moral and legal case in relation to repairing the legacy of underdevelopment sourced to native genocide and African slavery. And the legacies are horrendous, and they need repairing. And there's precedent for this. The Hebrew people, who had suffered a terrible racist Holocaust in the heart of Europe, received reparations.
Let me try to understand something. If you see the history of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, first the French, then the British came, and in order to cultivate the land, they imported slaves.
Yes.
So now your country is still officially part of the monarchy of the United Kingdom, and you are asking for reparations. You are going to ask reparations to your own government? And are you expecting them to pay for reparations of something that they themselves did?
You're looking at the issue in a formalistic sense, and I often find it problematic to explain to our brothers and sisters in Latin America. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is an independent nation state since 1979.
Okay.
But like Canada, we have a Governor General who represents the Queen.
Right.
The Queen is merely a titular head of state represented by the Governor General. The Queen has no power within the political system of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Anyway, officially your government is, and I quote, a parliamentary democracy under constitutional monarchy.
Absolutely.
And the monarch is Queen
Yes.
Elizabeth.
Constitutional monarchy. For instance, the Governor General, when I write Her Majesty the Queen, I say I want John Brown as Governor General. I get John Brown as Governor General. It's a popular democracy with the authority residing in the elected representatives and with the Prime Minister, who is the chief executive of the country. And that's why the adjective constitutional in front of monarchy is very important. It's nothing more than a symbolic issue, in the same way that the Governor General in Canada is a symbolic entity. Is one of these peculiar constitutional evolutions, a veritable fiction. So that when we, and by the way, it's, again, you may find this very strange. When Queen Elizabeth II is acting as Queen of England, she's not acting as Queen of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. She is the same person, but different constitutional positions.
And you're expecting what, as a, for example, in that presentation lecture you do it here in Washington, are you expecting reparations shortly? What are your expectations?
Well, I began by speaking very carefully to you about the moral and legal case. I don't think I need to go through with anyone about the morality of having some recompense, some repairing of the legacy. Remember, I'm talking about repairing the legacy of native genocide and African slavery. Not actual payment for the descendants of those who suffered, because that would involve you searching for descendants.
Generations.
Which is a problematic question. But we are talking about the legacy of the underdevelopment, which can be sourced to native genocide and African slavery. And no one disputes that. Under several international conventions, like, for instance, the Convention for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, to which the European countries are state parties and the countries in CARICOM are state parties, these countries are enjoined to assist with the repairing of the legacies of native genocide and African slavery. And what we have to do is to make the claim formally to the respective European countries, have a conversation. If that conversation turns out not to be satisfactory, then the next stage is to have an adjudication at the International Court of Justice.
And you expect eventually that is going to end up in that direction?
It would reach there, but we have to do educational work like what we are doing, diplomatic and political work. Thus, I'm very happy that...
And that's why you're here in Washington.
Absolutely.
Mr. Prime Minister, talking at the United Nations General Assembly last September, you were saying, and I quote your words, "The effects of climate change for us represents an existential issue of survival, yet we do not contribute to this looming danger." And also you add, "Clearly, the current model of the perverse and environmentally destructive global capitalism needs to go a fundamental restructuring for the sustainable development goals to be accomplished." How your country has felt and feels the effect of climate change?
Yes, if I may just say this, that proposition, which may sound very controversial to some people, if you just take out the word global capitalism and put a global market regime, it would be...
Free markets.
It would be Pope Francis speaking in his recent encyclical.
So you're in the same page.
I'm on the same page. I just want to make that point, just in case somebody says, hey, this is a guy who is coming from an extreme left side of the page. I'm in the mainstream of progressive Catholic thinking, and progressive ideas the world over. Now, the effect on us, we find it currently in rising sea levels, more frequent and more intense storms, rainfall, and thus landslide because we're a mountainous country, problems with our rivers. So we need a structured legal regime, which we're hoping will take place at COP21 in Paris, the Conference of Parties.
Coming on December.
Yes, under the United Nations Framework Convention for
You're
Climate
going to be there.
Change. I'm going to be there towards the end of it, where the heads of government and heads of state are there. It goes from the end of November, really, to early December. Now, we don't want to hear about discretionary assistance. We want to have a legal framework which is binding, first of all, that we go for levels in relation to the warming of the earth not above 2 degrees Celsius.
Which is enormous.
Above pre-industrial levels, Now, and we need monies for mitigation and adaptation to climate change. We ourselves, we're doing a number of things, but the problems are huge. I mean, large sections of our coastline are being eroded. Our rivers are bursting their banks.
As a consequence.
As a consequence, river defenses you need. Houses are affected. All of these things. And we ourselves, to show as part of the work that we are doing, by the end of 2018, 80% of our electricity is going to be renewable. Basically, hydro and geothermal, because we're...
So clean energy.
Clean energy. And so we are making our own contribution. Even though we ourselves, as that speech which you quoted at the United Nations, we don't contribute anything adverse to climate change. We are on the front line of suffering. But the people who contribute to this are the big consumer societies in the world. We in the United States of America, North America, it's Europe, it's China, and so on and so forth. And we need to have resources specifically earmarked and set aside with legally binding mandates, not only in relation to the science of climate change,
and your country,
but also to resources.
Your country has a high level of unemployment.
Yes.
Does unemployment, we're talking about at least 2 digits.
Yes.
Do you relate climate change to your unemployment, or is one of the reasons why the unemployment is so high?
It's one of the reasons, not the only one.
What are the other ones?
Well, first of all, there's the question of the very limitation of resources themselves. Then there's the question of the legacy of a colonial genocide and slavery. You take, when Britain left us, the northeast of the country was cut off from the south of the country, where the indigenous people were in a sense quarantined after 1800. The road, you had to drive on the base of a riverbed. And when the river comes down, nobody could pass. That's one legacy. That should have been attended to a long time by the British. In that part of the country, there was no clinic, no secondary school, no ambulance, no doctor.
Even today?
No.
A long time ago.
Since I came to office, I built a bridge across there. I've made advances in education and in health. But far more needs to be done. That's just one area. But I can point to several other areas. And throughout the country, geographically, let's take an issue of health. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the majority of people are of African descent.
Yeah, like 70%.
Oh, no. In terms of persons who would be clearly identified as African by their skin color, their pigmentation, but also mixture, the persons of African descent are 90-odd% of the population.
90%?
90-odd% of the population. Now, diabetes and hypertension are chronic diseases. The evidence shows, the research shows, that the countries from which you brought the slaves were forcibly brought on West Africa, they don't have this problem. But over the years, over the centuries, in places like St. Vincent and the Grenadines and other Caribbean countries, people ate a lot of salt fish, salt pork. I mean, you had to preserve this thing, and it altered our people's DNA and set them on a particular path and predispose them to particular type of illnesses. You go to Mississippi in the United States, you see a similar trend. But Mississippi also suffered from African slavery. But yet in West Africa, from where the peoples were forcibly brought, you don't have that problem. They're cultural issues, so they're economic issues, they're cultural issues, they're health issues, educational questions, a whole bundle of socioeconomic factors. The United Nations just approved the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, we need to have the resources to assist us in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, but we also need a special carve-out in relation to native genocide and African slavery.
On January of this year, yes, 2015, Vice President Joe Biden here in Washington, yes, he hosted a summit called the Caribbean Energy Security Summit.
Yes.
And immediately after, BBC was writing an article which was with a question mark. The title of the article, "The United States Want to Overthrow Petrocaribe." Do you think that that is true?
I think that there are sections of the American government would like to see not the overthrow of Petrocaribe, but that the influence of Venezuela through Petrocaribe be reduced.
Why?
I mean, though on the totem pole of problems or challenges, of ideas and the like, Venezuela, for the Americans, I suspect, would be low down on the totem pole. I mean, ISIL is a far more treacherous threat to them. But they don't...
Than Venezuela?
Yes. They don't like inside of their hemisphere. Let's face it. Venezuela is 27 million people. The United States is 330 million people. The Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela have been involved in winning elections after elections. They have a different perspective as to how they should reorder their political economy and society, which is not shared by the American elites. But that doesn't make Venezuela a threat to the United States of America.
And you remember that the President Obama was signing a decree that saying that Venezuela was a threat.
Yeah. Well, we raised that issue. We raised that issue with our brother, the president, at a CARICOM
President
meeting.
Maduro.
Yes. President Obama. He's my brother. In very much the same way.
We're talking about Jamaica?
Yeah.
In Jamaica. Before the Summit of the Americans.
Before the Summit of the Americans in April.
And what he said?
And he said that, look, Venezuela is not a threat to the United States of America. Yeah. And everybody knows that because we raised it, because that's an absurdity.
So
but the point is, and he also said, listen to me, guys. If I were in your position, I would be involved in Petrocaribe because it's a good financial mechanism to address your rise in fuel imports. I mean, you would have to be a complete moron not to accept that this is an act of enormous solidarity between Venezuela and Caribbean countries. And anybody who doesn't see that has his head in the proverbial sand like the ostrich.
So why the United States want to overthrow Petrocaribe? You really think that they want to overthrow Venezuela?
I don't think it's so much they want to overthrow Petrocaribe, because I say you have to be moronic not to consider it an initiative of real assistance. But it brings in train Venezuela's influence. It doesn't mean that St. Vincent and Grenadines, which benefits from Petrocaribe, Venezuela doesn't tell me and can't tell me what to do with my foreign policy. But we are within a particular partnership of respect, and we share a number of ideas about how unfair the world is arranged to the detriment of developing countries. And some of these ideas do not find resonance in the halls of power in the United States, in North America, and in Europe.
So let me ask you this question. So you were attending this summit here in Washington on January, and also you were in Jamaica just before the Summit of the Americas on April.
Yeah.
What the U.S. is proposing St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the rest of the countries of the Caribbean to try to diminish the influence of Venezuela in the Caribbean?
Well, in the case of
something attractive?
In the case of the energy summit, the answer by the United States there will look, let's see how the private sector can enter the picture and to help you to do alternative energy. Now, well, some of that is happening. Not American private sector, but in exploiting our geothermal resource, independent of anything what Joe Biden or the American government is doing or has done. We have a relationship with a Canadian company, Mera, and Reykjavik Geothermal from Iceland. And former President Clinton helped us to put together this particular consortium, not the US government. And presumably you have investors coming out of the US to get involved in these matters. That's all well and good. But you can't tell me, and you can't tell the countries in the Caribbean not to have relationship with Venezuela.
Which is what they're doing?
No, they can't. I mean, the point about it is this.
They're suggesting it.
You may say that. You may not even say it openly, but you may express concern. That sort of thing. In the way in which, when I visited Iran in 2009, I went to see the Holy Father, Pope Benedict, and then went to Iran. And the American diplomats who asked me subsequently, why have you gone there? No, the US can't choose my friends. And in fact, jokingly, I told one American diplomat, I said, please, explain to me. I've met Iran in the form of the former Persian Empire in the book of Daniel. Could you please tell me which book in the Old or the New Testament that I find the United States of America? I said, guys, simmer down now. And now they're meeting in Geneva to talk about Syria. They have worked out arrangements. So that, what do? Do I wait on the United States of America to decide when I can talk to people? That will never happen, not so long as I'm Prime Minister in my country. Similarly, with Cuba, the vainglory of superpower politics and the presidential politics of South Florida. I can't allow the foreign policy of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to become a prisoner of these notions or ideas. We have to establish an independent frame. We function within the context and the principles of the Charter of the United Nations and defend our sovereignty and independence.
That's what we're doing. Mr. Prime Minister, last question. What was the contribution of Petrocaribe with your country, with St. Vincent and the Grenadines? What precisely we're doing for you?
Tremendous. In terms of the normal arrangements, 50% of the fuel which we purchase, we have a delayed payment over a 22-year period at 1% interest. It means that I don't have to borrow money at higher rates of interest. So I get a financing arrangements. And then Petrocaribe helps with housing, with health, with education, with our Argyle International Airport, which we are building, and so on and so forth. Disaster preparedness. Now, in the case, the United States of America assists, but they do not assist in such a direct bilateral manner. They assist through remittances from abroad, or people who are working in the United States, monies which they put to the World Bank or to the IMF or the Inter-American Development Bank. And of course, the Americans would help with security questions, etc., etc. But in terms of direct bilateral assistance, what we see from countries like Venezuela, or indeed Cuba, you don't quite see it from several other countries which can do better.
And that is helping the region as a whole also?
Absolutely, helping the region as a whole.
So it's a key player now.
Venezuela is a major player in our region. As I used to tell President Chavez jokingly, we are getting back, in a sense, the interest from the money which Matilda took when she went to Venezuela. Remember this old folk song, Matilda, Matilda, you take me money and you run Venezuela. This is a woman who fell out with her husband. She didn't go to New York, she didn't go to Vladivostok, nor did she go to Paris. She went down to Venezuela. We have had relations for years. Venezuela is a Caribbean country. I mean, it's an absurdity to try to interrupt geography and history. And we had relations before the Bolivarian Revolution. But the Bolivarian Revolution has deepened the fraternal links, the links of solidarity, and we are in quest of strengthening those. And long may that be the case.
And has helped the quality of life of the
Absolutely,
people.
no question about it. Absolutely.
Mr. Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.